Well, my name's John Besant, and I'm Professor of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the University of Exeter. And I'm interested in innovation. I got interested in it basically out of frustration. Once upon a time, I was an engineer. I'm really dangerous these days in an oil refinery, but that's how I started. And I worked for big companies, and they had plenty of money. If you had a good idea, there was the money for it. They had smart people. They employed me, so that was good. All the ingredients for innovation were there, and yet it didn't quite work. They weren't a complete failure, but I just had this growing sense that, we could be faster with our product development, or get the customer more what they wanted, or improve our processes more effectively. All these sorts of things that, as a young engineer, I felt frustrating. And then I had an opportunity to study this, and I've spent the rest of my life looking at how we manage innovation and what we can learn in terms of doing that more effectively. And I guess a couple of points really. The first is my definition of innovation. It's very simple. It's value from ideas. Now, the value could be commercial, very often is, but it's more than just business. A lot of my current work is about social value. I work with the Red Cross, with the Save the Children Fund, humanitarian players, and quite simply, innovation there is absolutely essential. It's life and death. So in a sense, innovation is important because it's about creating value from ideas. In terms of what's driving innovation, there's plenty of evidence. If we don't change what we offer the world, our products, our services, whatever we offer the world, and if we don't change the ways we create and deliver them, we may not be around. In business, that's absolutely true. The marketplace soon sorts out the people who don't change. But even in the public sector, even in the humanitarian sector, there are still those challenges. We need to change. It's a kind of survival and growth imperative. There's a second point, which is, even if we knew how to manage innovation, even if for today we said, yep, we can manage it, that won't be enough because it's a constantly moving target. The problem never changes. It's still, how do we create value from ideas? But the context in which that happens is constantly changing. When I started my career, we didn't have an internet. Now you really have to think hard because the internet is such a powerful tool to help with innovation. We're now thinking about the emerging world. 6 billion people are suddenly part of our thinking about innovation. We didn't really have that 20 years ago. So the context is shifting, whether it's users becoming involved, whether it's different perspectives coming from new technologies, whether it's different contexts. So in a sense, even if we learned how to manage innovation, we also need to be humble enough to say, we don't know it all. We need to keep updating those models. So if I asked you a simple question, when did you last use your Spengler? That's S-P-E-N-G-L-E-R, Spengler. You might look at me and think, what's he on about? But I'm pretty sure you've got a Spengler, and you may have touched yours recently. Now, if I reframed the question and said, when did you last use your vacuum cleaner, whatever brand you have, there you go. You'd know how to answer it. So, useless fact, Mr. J. Murray Spengler invented and patented the electric vacuum suction sweeper. And nobody I asked that question of has ever heard of him. There's a challenge. Innovation isn't like the cartoons, bing, light bulb. That's not innovation. It's the start of something, it's a bright idea. But if we're going to do what I said a moment ago, create value from that idea, there has to be more. And that's innovation. It's a process, it's a journey, taking that idea, and the ideas are fine, but then doing something with it, revising it, shaping it, creating the reality that will create value for somebody. And that's a process, and I guess one of the key lessons we have learned about innovation is what that process looks like. It's a journey, it has a number of stages. It's typically got this kind of funneling shape, whether you have it vertically or horizontally, but it's moving from all what could be to something that's actually there. And that's true whether we're talking about a new product, a new service, a different process, a new business model. It's the same journey. So if I go back to my autobiography, when I was a frustrated engineer, I guess the big challenge is, where is the process? How does it work? Could it work more effectively? So the process is a kind of a framework that helps us. It's a map, if you like, for this journey from ideas to value. And that's its its strength inside an organization as well, because it becomes the focal point for organizing a number of activities. If you've got a startup, much of this can go on fairly informally. If you've got 35,000 people, you probably need to put some kind of formal process, some formal structure, understand who's contributing at which stage. It becomes a focusing core device, a bit like a skeleton in a body. It gives it some shape. So how does this process actually play out? Bright ideas right the way through. Well, I think where it starts, and the sort of the wide mouth part of this funnel, is essentially a search process. We've learned over the years a lot about innovation. Where does it come from? And the answer is everywhere. It comes from people in the lab with their white coats beavering away. Yes, that's a source of innovation. It comes from listening to the customers and let them pull the innovations through, so market research is important. It comes from copying your competitors. Nothing wrong with that, no shame. You can't steal their ideas, but you can certainly learn from what they're doing. It comes from users, frustrated people who often prototype something. Accidents happen, and if you're smart, you say, that's interesting, what could we do with that? Post-it notes was a non-sticky glue, but marvelous if you're in an organization that's open to that. Actually, the lesson we've learned over the years is that innovation comes from all sorts of places. So the real key at the start of the process is, do we search? Do we search as well as we could? Do we search as widely as we could? And so this idea of where do we get the original ideas from, it's a search process. Now, it might be a formal market research or technology research. It might be looking to the future. So a lot of techniques around futures thinking, what could be and how might we use that to feed in. It could well be just thinking. In a sense, we've got the most important piece of innovation equipment already fitted as standard in any human being. We're creative. But we know there are plenty of tools that can help us with that. So this idea of using our own creativity and amplifying that, another great source of innovation. But the big question, if I was to ask any organization about how well you're managing the first stage of the process, how well do you search? Do you search as widely and as well as you could? And my earlier point, the context keeps changing, so that now we've got wonderful new tools for finding things that weren't going to be possible a while ago. If you take the internet, that now means we can amplify our search enormously. There's a platform, one of many, called innocentive.com. Innocentive's a kind of eBay for innovation. Basically, you've got seekers, I'm looking for a solution to a problem, and solvers, I think I might have an idea for you. And you put them together across a marketplace. What's happened, and this is only possible in an era of internet, is that something like 250,000 people are saying, I think I can solve your problem. They may not all be right, but what that gives you in terms of search is a massive opportunity. And the evidence is it's not they can do the work so you don't have to. It's actually those 250,000 people think differently. So somebody's probably coming at your problem from a very different angle. Now that's an example of extending your search as the context changes and new tools become available. So search for me, how well do we search? How widely do we search? So setting up this search challenge is how well do we search, how widely? That's fine. The risk is, of course, we just drown in data. Just lots of possibilities. So we actually need to make sure we can handle that. And there's a wonderfully academic word, absorptive capacity, but it's quite powerful because it basically says, if we're going to make use of new knowledge, then first of all, we have to know where it is. So we've got to look for it. We've also got to know how we can get hold of it. And so we've got to know where it is, do we want it, but also how do we pull that in? And that's quite a big challenge. And when we've got it, what are we going to do with it? And the first thing is we've got to really absorb that, make some sense of it, and finally we can deploy it. So there's a whole thing around search which is not just go fishing, but actually can you fish in a kind of strategic way? I think related to that is this question of we haven't got infinite resources for doing the searching. It would be lovely to amplify what we've got, but even if we use the best of the internet, even if we have lots of people in research and in market research and so on, even then we've still got to be strategic about where do we go hunting and why.